Welcome to the Software People Stories. I'm Shiv.
I'm Chitra.
And I'm Gayatri.
We bring you interesting, untold stories of people
Associated with the creation
Or consumption of software-based solutions.
You'll hear stories of what worked,
and sometimes what didn't,
you will also hear very personal experiences.
and insights that would trigger your thoughts
And inspire you to do even greater things.
Before we jump into today's conversation, a special thanks to PM Power Consulting for encouraging and supporting this show right from the start. With over 1,000 person-years of collective experience, PM Power has helped many organizations, teams, and individuals chart out their own journeys of excellence and make progress. Thank you, PM Power. Now, let's move to today's episode. The concept of S-curves is something all of us would have encountered at various points in our lives. As your favorite podcast nears the 6-year milestone, we, the hosts, felt that it was time to reflect and ideate on the next S-curve for the podcast. More of that in the special episode number 312. But to relate to the concept of S-curves, we thought we would have a special series of conversations with PM Power coaches on their personal and professional S-curves. Like always, these are unscripted conversations. In this thematic conversation on S-curves, I am in conversation with my colleague, coach, and serial author, Paramu Kurumathur. In this conversation, Paramu shares some specific S-curves in his life about the transition during his school days, school to college, college to corporate life, and so on. He also talks about the transition from being an individual to being a married person, then a parent, and also aspects related to work-life balance. He also talks about the transitions from not only one role to another, but also one organization to another, moving across a couple of corporate organizations, then to a startup, and then to an NGO. Paramu shares his experience on leadership and scaling, as well as entrepreneurship. Listen on. Hi, Paramu. Welcome back to the Software People Stories.
Thank you, Shiv. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah, likewise. We've talked about different things in the past, about your personal progress, your professional, and then also the books that you've been writing, all that. But now, as we are nearing the milestone of the 300th episode, or 6 years, I would say 300 episodes we just crossed, I thought there is probably going to be some big transition, even for the podcast. But otherwise, personally also, this is a topic that I found many of our coaches have been asking and want to understand some of their big transitions, whether it is in personal or professional life, which we normally call as S-curves. So we'd like to hear about your S-curves, or maybe some of the S-curves, which could be examples or inspirations for others also to look at. So when we say S-curves, what are some of the S-curves that first come to your mind in terms of your own personal or professional lives?
Okay. Anyway, first of all, congratulations on reaching this milestone of 300 episodes and 6 years, etc. So, and you have really kept it up. It's very difficult for anyone to actually do this consistently over 6 years. And you have done it really well. You and your friends. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
So when you talk about S-curves, as you said, there can be different kinds of S-curves in your personal life, in your professional life, horizontal, vertical, all sorts of S-curves can be there, right? So, the first S-curve I think I faced in my life, not S-curve, the transition from one to the other, is basically, it was in my 7th standard in school. I was going along pretty well in Trivandrum. Then my father got transferred to Calicut. And that was a real big change for me, right? Mm-hmm. Because you go to Calicut, everybody is different. The accent there is different. And the way you speak Malayalam is different, right? Everything is completely different. The teachers are different, right? So that was a big transition for me, and a bit difficult to get around that, to actually get to know the people well. But over a month or so, you get used to the boys there, and then you get over your nervousness and your and your problems. But that was a big S-curve I faced right in the beginning of my life, when I was 12 years old or something, right? So that was one of the S-curves, right?
So, what were the kind of pressures that you had to face? For instance, in your old school in Trivandrum, you would have been, say, at a particular rank, or your performance would have been at some level. And
Correct,
then
correct.
now when you got into the new school, having to cope with, say, the new friends and the new ways of teaching or new school rules, etc. Did that have either an impact or add some pressure to continue to perform?
Yeah, I mean, there was pressure, of course. But what I found was that I performed better in the new school than in the old school.
Oh, good.
Right. And interestingly, this is a very strange story. When I was in 6th standard, I used to be second in class in my division. I mean, it's not the whole class, in the division. And the guy who was doing first was a guy called Paulos. He died that year. Right? And therefore I became first. So that's actually an S-curve, which is a very, very, I still remember that guy, right? And he died when he was 11 years old, right? If he had been alive, he would have been a doctor. His father was a doctor. I'm sure he would have been a doctor, right? So I was first in class there. When I came to Calicut, I still was first. It was not very difficult, right? So that there was no such pressures were not there. It's basically getting to know the people. See, all the boys, most of the boys are bigger.
Oh,
they're older than in Trivandrum. Right? Many of them have been in the same class for 3 years, 4 years, etc.
Okay.
Right? And the other thing was that many of them spoke Hindi. Right? Trivandrum is all only Malayalam and English. Right? Whereas here, a lot of Hindi, there are lots of Marwadis, Gujaratis. Lots of Hindi was thrown around. So that also was a change for me in school. So these are some of the pressures, but otherwise, generally, okay. The management of the school was the same. It's still the same, that Jesuit Catholic kind of people. So there's no problem there in the way they handle the students or way they beat the students. So there's no problem there. Yeah. Oh, the next S-curve was getting into IIT. IIT, it's a kind of a good, what do you call it? The other was a curveball. As if you use a baseball terminology, that was a curve. This is actually a slow, fast, slow ball, that you can hit very easily. Right? Okay. But the only thing is that when you go there, you find that you're a topper, you're a great guy. You go there, everybody is a topper there. So that is a little bit unsettling. I mean, you have to actually find your place. I mean, nobody actually looks up to you because. Right? So that is a kind of a curveball. But otherwise, there's no problem there. But the real S-curve came at the end of my course in aero engineering, where you find that there's not too many jobs available. For an aero engineer, those days in India, there weren't too many jobs. And the only thing I had was a scholarship to France, right? And a job in HAL. And both these were not, the scholarship to France was not very good because the degree there, the diploma, the profondi that you get there, was really not recognized in India, right?
Okay.
From Grenoble or that Ansay in France. And the other thing was that the job in HAL is a kind of now HAL is much better. Those days it's kind of a dead-end job, But the S-curve really happened out there. The slow, fast, slow, nice ball, straight ball happened because I got an MTech in computer science. So I could change my line. So that was a big transition from from one S to the other S, changing from aero to computer science, right? So that was, again, I suppose there was a bit of luck involved, right? Because there was one seat reserved for aero and I got that. Right? Okay. If I had taken mechanical engineering and gone there, I would have gotten to computer science. Even electronics, I wouldn't have gotten because I would not have got the kind of rank needed to get into MTech. Here, I got into MTech because the 3 or 4 people who were ahead of me in my class in BTech, they all went overseas and they didn't write this CPA, whatever test it was. Okay. So I came first. That is kind of an S-curve transition, that luck played a little bit of a part. So that is one thing, right? Okay, in MTech, kind of we all cruise through as normally we all do, right? Then getting into Tata Burrows, into a new job, that's another big change. In fact, I'm sure you also know that when we were invited for the first preliminary meeting or something, they told us to wear business suits. Right? Now, I was in Calicut. Nobody in Calicut knew what the business suit was, right? So I went to a tailor and said, "Can you stitch?" I bought a suiting piece from somewhere from a shop. Went to a tailor. He said, "Oh, sir, TT ayo. Have you got a job as TT?" Only TT wore suits those days, coats. And he stitched it so badly that on the day of the initiation, what do we call? I couldn't wear it. So I had to carry it in my hand. So I had a coat which I couldn't wear. Right? So again, those are all little initiation, little S-curve changes that knowing that you needed a coat or a jacket, which you've never worn so far. Right? That is a big change, Your whole life has changed. So living in Bombay, with all these new friends, right? That's a big change. Then, of course, going overseas. That's another big change. Going to Orange County or Irvine or whatever, the whole scene was totally different, right? And of course, there were other people, other colleagues who helped the transition to make the transition easier, right? Okay. But otherwise, again, that is a major transition over this thing. Then of course, coming to, of course, in between the personal things like getting married, having children, right? All those S-curves that were going on in your life while you were skirving in your office. Right? And of course, as you all know, after some time, the job in TUL it's kind of stagnating. My wife had some health issues. We had to move to Bangalore, and then we were stagnating, and that's how I moved to digital. And that is a total change, because suddenly you're tasked to set up a GCC for digital, right? A Unix development center, and that took a lot of my guile and wile. So that was I found that very challenging and very interesting. It's a good transition from being a project and program manager to becoming a general manager, right? So that was one. After that, and things are going pretty well there. When I suppose I forced an S-curve and did the startup of this Bell Softech or whatever, and there it didn't go too well. And that is one place where I did fairly only average, right? At the same time, there was also the downturn in the industry. So I left that, right? And I joined, and since there was downturn, there were not too many jobs available at that time. Therefore, I joined ActionAid, which is an NGO, right? And I became the CTO of ActionAid worldwide. That is a good job. I lasted there for about 11 years. And I left because, for one thing, the book writing bug had by then between. Yeah. Right. And I thought that maybe I should spend some time writing the book, the first Aryan. I had the idea well formed. And I actually started writing a few chapters then. Right. So that is when I left, and then my daughter's marriage was there and all the kind of stuff was there. And I started writing this book. And that was a major change, right? From a corporate kind of life into becoming an author, right? That is a major change that I went through, right? So, and then around that time, I also joined PM Power, right? And thankfully, I've been lucky enough to be able to write more books for PM Power, right? So I published a couple of books outside PM Power and a couple of books inside PM Power, right? So being the author, getting myself together to write books, that has been a major change for me, a major transition, right? So no, that's the main, those were my skills and my life. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. I was trying to also see if we can very loosely put them into two buckets. Some things that happened irrespective of whether you like it or want it or not.
Right.
Like moving from one grade to another, or from school
Right.
to college, or college to a job, things like that. But you also talked about some things that were intentional, like getting into digital or doing the startup or
Right.
what
Right.
were the constraints and so on. Right. So I would like to understand a little more on the second class of S-curves. Some of these, when you said that you felt you were stagnating or not, you wanted more challenges.
Right.
Which aspect was more, the push aspect or the pull aspect? There is the push aspect in your current environment, or the attraction or the pull aspect of the new environment?
It's almost always both.
Which was dominant?
I suppose the pull aspect was dominant, because
Okay.
the push aspect, even though you're stagnating, let's say if you take an organization like TUL, even though you're stagnating, I mean, there's very little chance of you're being pushed out, right? Because you can do something there, you can do some projects, you can go get some projects, all sorts of things, you can do something, right? Except that your development in the organization may not be very high. So the push element is much less than the pull element. So when somebody came to me, the headhunter came to me and told me about this new opportunity in digital, where you can set up a GCC. I felt that was very, very challenging, right? So there the pull aspect was certainly much more than the push aspect, right?
Okay.
And even in digital, from digital to Bell Software, even there the pull aspect was certainly much more than the push aspect. But from the shift from Bell Software to ActionAid, I suppose both it's kind of equal.
Yeah. Okay.
So, for one thing, we are not doing too well. So there was a kind of a push internally from me, myself. At the same time, I've been doing so many of these corporate jobs. I thought maybe a change to an NGO will kind of give me a different perspective, right? Therefore, that pull also was there. It's kind of, I should say, they're both equal. And of course, that job did give me this different perspective I asked for. Going to different countries, meeting different kinds of people, right? Going to different communities and understanding their problems. So yeah, so I think there's both, right?
Okay.
And of course, in the author stage, it is certainly the pull, right? I wanted to actually write the books, right?
Okay.
For writing books, you needed to be not too engaged in an organization that I need to spend a lot of time there, right? So that is certainly a pull aspect.
Okay. So whether it was the GCC setup or the startup, while the pull factor I can understand was probably weighing more, how did you handle the reality of going into an uncertain environment? And in both cases, I assume there was no precedence. So which means that whatever you had to do, you had to come up with something and you have to own that.
See, the two jobs were fairly different. One was within the confines of an existing organization, whereas the other one was completely different, right? It's a totally new one, except that the founders or the people who were funding me had an organization which was kind of running already in Mysore or something, right? And they had some contacts in the US. But other than that, there's no security of an existing organization, right? Whereas the GCC, there was a kind of security, right? Already there, right? With both the Indian organization that was hosting me, as well as the US organization that was my bosses or whatever, right? So there was this big difference between the two. So in the first one, there was some kind of security because both the head of the organization here in India, right, and my boss in the US, they were pretty. They were very helpful, right? They knew what needs to be done, and they were helpful, and therefore it is not such a. It's not very difficult, right? All I had to do was to go there, talk to different people, put projects in my pocket, and come back, right? Convince the different group heads there that something can be done in India, right? So whereas the other one was much more difficult. Now here you are going to customers who are not in any way attached to you. Whereas the other one, you're part of digital and you're going to digital people, right? So there was some kind of a connection already there. In the other organization, everything was new. The people who were funding didn't have any idea what needs to be done, right? And to some extent, neither did I, right? And you're going to customers who are completely new, right? They don't know about us. We don't know about them, right? So that was a real challenge, trying to actually get customers who you had to actually sell yourself to, right? Because in digital, it is much different because they knew who you were. They knew that India is okay, that India can do things. Other organizations have done it before, right? I mean, in a small scale, right? Because I myself had done it in Tata Burrows when we brought some Unix projects to India from Unisys. So that was okay. But here is a completely different thing. We are working on embedded systems, which was a completely new area for me. And going and trying to go to a customer and figure out what was his problem in embedded systems, right? And how can we solve that problem for him? Now that was quite difficult. So that is a very challenging thing, more challenging than the digital one. So there's a difference there.
Okay. So how did you approach learning in this situation? Because you have to learn in a short period or get into newer, like you said, domains of embedded or whatever. When you're getting into a sales role, the job of selling, it's probably new. You need to know, what are probably some proven ways of approaching that or being successful, or talking their terminology domain, or at least gaining the confidence, probably. Even if I'm not the expert, I have a team that will support me and you and all that.
Right. The main thing is by reading things and talking to people, right? For example, this guy, Dinesh Jain, I don't know whether remember this guy called Dinesh Jain. He was a consultant to me for some time when I was in the new Bell Softech. He helped me put together the strategy, etc. of the organization. And he gave me some tips on how to go and sell and all that kind of stuff. I think he had done that before. Right? So some amount of learning came from him. And then, of course, they're also learning from my funders. They were, shall we say, Marwadis, who knew business in and out. The father of the guy who was actually the managing director of the organization was the FICCI chief and things like that. Right? So they have the business in their blood. Business aspect is something which I learned from them. Right? And the sales and such aspects from some of my colleagues. Right? So that's how I did that. Whereas in the other role, as I told you, there were mentors on both sides who had, right? So that way it was difficult,
Okay. So a related thing is, once you are deeply involved in creating an organization, whether it's a GCC or the startup, how difficult or easy was it to let go?
So to let go of digital was very difficult. Well, I was doing very well there. Things were going well, right? And as I told you, it's much more of a pull. So I was not, I was going into something that is unknown. The pull was from the unknown. Right? So there was a lot of worry. Right? It was not easy. Well, the next one was much easier. Because generally there was some amount of push and some amount of pull, right? So that was much easier, right? Well, the first one was not as easy as the other one. And also leaving TBL, Tata Burrows, itself also was not very easy. Because again, you are going into something unknown. Whereas you are established, you are in the organization, you are secure there. So leaving that also was a bit difficult. But leaving Bell Softech was not all that difficult because things are not going that well, and therefore it's time to get out.
Yeah. The reason I was asking is many times we've had the managers who come and say that, no, I have actually built this team. Now I'm getting a promotion. I have to now go into a new team, new domain, something else. And that attachment to the old team and wanting to maybe continue to influence or play a role in that organization. Were there such temptations, or how did you overcome those? Let's say when you set up the GCC, you were the boss and you would have the team also would have had some attachment to you. And they would obviously be coming to you for guidance and decisions and all that when you were there. So even when you were not part of that system, the tendency from both, like being curious, hey, what happened to this bid that we made, or what happened to how is this project going or customer being?
Right.
And either way, whether it is you wanting to know or sharing your perspectives on how something can be handled, or the team still wanting to be in touch with you and then ask you for the guidance and inputs and all that, or saying that was it a clean break, saying that no, okay, we'll stay friends, we'll have coffee, but then nothing more.
No, there was a lot of connections even after digital, for example. After I left TBL, the connections that we still have. You were part of that organization. We still maintain the contact with people there, and we still want to know what's going on in TBL. Of course, once it merged with TCS and became a large organization, we don't really care too much. But till that happened, we were pretty keen to know what is going on there. Who was leading it, who was the manager, etc. And the same thing happened in digital, right? So I kept in touch with all the people. I figured out what was going on, what new projects came in, what actually went on. So all that happened very routinely, right? And also from this other organization, Bell Softech, I did keep in touch with the people, right? And so to know what is going on, what kind of project were they getting. So there's never a clean break as such from any of the organizations.
Okay.
Even from ActionAid, there's no real clean break. I'm still in touch with many people there. But of course, ActionAid, this kind of organizations where people change fairly fast, right? Lots of changes happen. And especially during the COVID time, the whole organization changed. There, it's not as much as it is in the other organizations.
Now, the transition to ActionAid, I'm probably making a lot of assumptions here, is that the solutions that you were building or you needed to deliver had probably a greater chance of being scaled across the globe, right? There could be probably something that you do only for one country or one community.
Right.
But as an organization in the social sector, addressing similar challenges, it could probably be cross-deployed or scaled.
Right.
Now, as the CTO, was there a transition of having to think at scale, whether it is a choice of technology, whether it is how we are deploying this, or how do you get people to start using it, the cultural aspects, etc.
Actually, if you look at actually the kind of IT strategy that we made or I made was actually for the whole IT organization of ActionAid. So the strategy itself is a scale strategy. It is not just for one country or two countries. It was for the whole world.
Right. So that was my question, saying that now, how do you suddenly start thinking scale? So personally, I know that if I go to a restaurant or if I want to buy a car or a TV or something, I work with some budgets. But as an organization, when you have to handle a much larger budget, maybe zeros that we don't normally use in our personal life.
Right.
How do you get the detachment at the same time being responsible for doing that? I'm thinking scale, not be overly frugal.
Actually, I didn't think of that at all. I mean, the sense that the whole, I suppose, these 45 countries or whatever that we were dealing with, to me, seemed to be like one organization. I dealt with dealt with it as it is one organization, right?
Mm.
And therefore, whatever you're doing for, for example, network connections,
Mm.
right? You had to actually make sure that every country had network connections, or but then you find that in certain countries you cannot have network connections, or it's very, very expensive, right? Right, and it's very slow, right? So you had to figure out what to do there. Should we get some, the world space, some all sorts of different kinds of things that you have to bring into your mind, right? For some reason, I was not overwhelmed by the fact that you do it for the whole world.
Okay.
Right? And there was a lot of support from countries like UK, right? Where there were lots of people there in the IT organization who can help you with actually implementing it in other countries. We also had regional managers, right, for Asia, Africa, and Latin America and Europe, who would also put in their inputs into budgeting, into actually implementing the strategy, etc.
Okay.
Right? But one thing is that you're sitting on a huge pile of money, right? And I remember my boss telling me, see, one of the reasons that we had you here is that we want somebody with integrity, because that money was available to anybody to do whatever they want with it, right?
Yeah.
Right. So therefore, that was actually I never found it overwhelming. I thought that is okay, right? And any plans I made for the whole organization, rather than just for one country or
Yeah, that's interesting, because that is one of those things about preparing for a new role. Well, the attraction is there.
Right.
I was just curious on whether there are ways by which one can learn or get trained, or is it something that is part of an individual's basic?
I think it's part of the individual. In IT, a big problem is that this connectivity is a major issue, right? Because scaling up connectivity is not easy. See, scaling up Microsoft products, deploying Microsoft products to different countries, all that is not very difficult. But connectivity itself is a problem, because different countries have different kinds of infrastructure. Right? In some countries, that is very poor, right?
Okay.
And therefore, you have to have some countries, we even had dial-up lines.
Okay.
Right? So that was a major problem. So it is not really it's a question of scaling up in an environment of diverse infrastructure.
Moving on to your next transition, your writing, because after handling roles that were, say, leadership roles where you had teams and you had to create the plans and execution and everything around all that, going to what may otherwise be called as an individual contributor role. And this is also something where, at least in books, you see that there is so much of thought that has gone in creating a book, whether it's the characters, the interplay, a lot of attention to details.
Right.
So how was that getting back into the micro level from macro? How was that transition for you?
See, I always wanted to write a book, right? So the idea of writing this book, the first Aryan, right, which is actually an interpretation of, it's a novel, it's a murder mystery. It's interpreted from a Vedic Sukta. So I always had this idea of doing that, right? Right. And I think the way I became a half decent writer, or a decent enough writer for a publisher to look at me, was by writing and writing and rewriting and rewriting again and again. Right. So my book actually went through maybe some 10 versions before I actually dared to submit it to somebody. Right. So in fact, the protagonist and the antagonist, actually I interchanged. Right. Person who so the bad guy in the earlier version became the good guy. The good guy became the bad guy, right? So all that happened over a lot of versions. First of all, you think in macro terms. As I told you, the first thing you thought was, what is the plot of the story, right? So that is a macro thinking. And then you have to go down to details, step by step. And again, the way I did it was by writing. Right? So you write a fairly broad kind of book, Then you write the next book, which is more detailed, right? So you go from macro to micro to micro to micro. As I said before, you have to change it around sometimes, right? To make sure that it makes sense, right? Because when I read the Vedic hymn once more, I found that I had got it all wrong.
Okay.
The protagonist and the antagonist had to change. So that is a major change, right? And sometimes you will find that in some bits and pieces, you are actually not changed the antagonist and the protagonist, right?
Okay.
So the editor had to come and tell me, hey, there's a problem here, right? The other thing is that I started writing from the first person point of view, right?
Okay.
So the hero was saying, I did. I changed it to he. So some places again that he became I. It still remained I. And so the editor had to come and tell me there's still an I. Right? All these little problems would be there, right? But the only way to actually take a book from a macro to a micro level is to keep writing and going down and down. That's the only way you do that. And that's the way I'm doing for this current book I'm writing, leadership book. You go from the most, from the highest level to the lowest level, right?
Okay.
So it's the only way to actually go from a macro to a micro level in a book, right? So you think macro first, and then in the other case, you had managers do the micro things. In this case, you have only yourself. So you do the micro things yourself, but one after the other. Right?
Okay. Yeah, two quick questions as we close. Now, from your S curves, is there any period after which you feel restless and you need to move to the next S curve? Has there been a pattern around that, or
The number of years? Huh?
yeah, like the 7-year reach that you talk about?
Not really.
Okay.
See, the thing is that maybe there could have been itches, but after 7 years, complacency will set in, right? And this is what happened in Tata Burroughs, for example, right? And this is what happened in ActionAid also, right? Complacency sets in, saying you're doing okay, you can stay here forever, right? But I think the environment does not want that, because the environment is actually sick of seeing the same guy forever, right? And therefore, at some time you have to leave, right? So in Tata Burroughs also, the same guy is staying around for 100 years. Does not really help the organization too much. Right? So you have to leave, and that's why we all left, right, around the same time, right? So so that is what it's all about. So you have to figure out when this itch happens, or when complacency sets in. More than the itch, it's the complacency, right? So I think that's when you have to leave.
Yeah, that's nice, because you also normally say that when it starts flattening.
Right.
So the last question for this conversation and S curves is, have you already thought about your next S curve?
Oh, by the way, my other S curve I didn't tell you, my guitar.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. So that is my biggest S curve. I'm learning the guitar, right? And that is a completely new thing for me, right? So I never done music before. And as I told you, my hands were not moving in coordinated ways at all, right? And even though I can't sing while I play the guitar, because I can't sing while I play they don't coordinate well enough. Right? So that is another big S curve for me, right? So, and other than that, I think I'll continue to write for some more time. I don't know what the next thing will be, other than guitar and writing, right? I don't know what my next thing should be. I don't see anything in the horizon to jump to, right? I don't know, maybe.
But the aspirational goal of winning a Booker or Sahitya Academy,
that is not in my hands. So that's not. No, one aspiration I have is to write a few songs. Right? Write a few songs, but I think that's going to be a difficult thing. but maybe I will try it one of these days.
Mhm.
Write a song and then tune it and sing
okay.
it.
Okay.
Right? That's going to be difficult, right?
Mm.
So to become the next
Bob Dylan, Taylor Swift.
Bob Dylan or Rod Stewart. It's going to be very difficult. But that is my, if you want to call it an aspiration, that's my aspiration.
Thanks, Paramu. That was wonderful. At least now I need to go start searching for my next discover, the next challenge to look at.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shiv. It was great talking to you. I enjoy talking to you as always. So thank you very much.
If you would like to share your S-curves, do reach out to us.
We thank Siddharth for the music and Anita for promoting the Software People Stories.
If you like this episode,
Please subscribe on your favorite podcast client.
And spread the word in your network.
if you'd like to share your story,
Contact us at podcasts@pm-powerconsulting.com.